We begin not with an argument, but with a silence that settles in your bones, silence so vast that it demands your attention, so raw that it uncloaks every craving, every tremor of the illusory self. In this silence, the will rises, a whisper of unrest. It flickers persistent in the darkness of your chest. And in that flicker, you see the first truth: this will that propels you, this force without reason, is the very engine of your suffering. You have been taught that desire is progress, that reaching, striving is noble and pure, yet beneath every yearning lies the ache of emptiness, the void that spawns yet another yearning. The will is a serpent devouring its own tail. It is not your ally but your prison warden, and every longing is a link in the chain that binds you to the wheel of endless becoming. Hear the echo of your heart's faint despair when desire fades and accomplishment arrives. When you grasp the object of longing, wealth, love, recognition, what remains? A momentary glow, then dull ashes. The will has moved on. Your delight dissolves into ennui. The relief is transient, the release an illusion, anticipation the only real comfort. You exist in anticipation, never gratitude, never repose. Look at the stage of modern life. Screens ablaze, messages pinging, lives curated yet hollow, consumption paraded as freedom, choice bought as salvation. We carry virtual selves like flags, hoping that others' applause will heal the fracture within. Yet these digital valleys are mirrors of our own vacuity. They reflect the same hunger, the same despair. What freedom lies in scrolling through images of fulfillment while your own soul grows ragged? Pause at the horizon of your mind. You chase meaning as though meaning is external, a golden city just beyond the sea. But each step brings you to another shore, another refracted glimmer. The meaning vanishes, reappears, vanishes again, a cruel mirage, and you weep for what never existed. But the tears themselves are your truth. You cannot deny the sorrow if you have lived. Suffering is the currency of existence. Not failure, not defect, but the substance of being. And yet, there is a strange clearing in that misery. Not consolation, not redemption, something quieter. The opportunity to see the will unmasked, to sense the machinery of desire whirring beneath your bones. In the hollow of that seeing, something softens. You do not grow wings, you become simpler, less, stripped of noise. You perceive the will's hunger, but you are not consumed by it. You watch the serpent coil, but you step aside. Every moment of such witnessing is a release point, an oasis of clarity in the desert of longing. You feel the tremor in your chest, the racing mind, and then nothing, or almost nothing. In that space, tension loosens. You know you are not your thoughts. You are the one who watches them. You are not the will, you are its witness. This witness, this stillness, is no triumph. It is no victory lap. It is a subtle resignation to the shape of suffering, to the form of desire, to the inevitability of your own unrest. The path does not vanish, but its burden becomes lighter when acknowledged, when no longer feared. Imagine existence as a candle burning at both ends. Each flame is a longing, a striving. If you fan the flames with more craving, the wick burns faster, bright and brief. If you do nothing, it still burns, because combustion is its nature. But if you hold the candle without feeding it, you see the wax pool, you hear the sizzle of time passing. You touch reality's edge, the impermanence of flame, the slow eclipse of matter. Desire is that candle. It lights your steps, yet each step consumes you. The bright facade of purpose that desire builds is a hologram. The will projects the scene and escapes, dissolves. And so you circle, ever closer to the center that isn't center, a void that isn't void. Meaning rises, falls, dissolves. Renews meaning is borrowed from suffering and returned to suffering. Nothing is born, nothing preserved, everything drained to feed the unquenchable flame. But there is a sanctuary in this recognition. It is not shelter, but resonance, the quiet kinship between your hunger and the world's hunger. Each life, a candle in the dark. Each flame flickers, bends toward illusion, blazes bright, then gutters. There is no heroism in this, only the sorrow and radiance of being alive. And through this sorrow, a subtle compassion can grow, not an aspiration to heal, but a deep alignment with what is. You look into the eyes of another and see their unrest reflected. Two candles flickering side by side, separate, yet bound by the same wax and wick. In that mirror, you find kinship with all living beings. You see how the will binds them, how suffering births their striving, how meaning blooms and decays in their minds. And your sorrow makes you tender but not hopeful. Tender to the fact of suffering, to its inevitability, to its silent dignity. It is here, in the smoky half-light, that you inch toward transcendence. Transcendence not in the sense of escape, but in the sense of soft dissolution. You do not ascend, you become still. The will still stirs, though you do not feed it. The candle burns, though you do not shield it. Its wax pools and drips, and you watch, in compassion, in sobriety. You meet your vulnerability without flinching, your sorrow without shame. And then the final breath unrolls the scene. The lantern flickers, not from wind, but from age. You sense the shape of your own impermanence in the glow. You hold the candle without fear. Not holding on simply holding. The flame bends toward its end, but you do not try to rekindle it. You do not extinguish it. You just hold it, in the hush that remains when desire withdraws. Even briefly. There is no moral punch, no uplift. Not meaning restored, but meaning observed. Not consolation, but quiet kinship. Not your burden erased, but your attention freed from its chase. The candle burns, the wax melts, you breathe. And something in that unmaking feels whole. You do not walk away changed, triumphant. You walk away, and perhaps the will returns, as will it must. But now you know, you are not its victim. You may still stumble, you will still seek. Yet in the space between seeking, you have glimpsed what is not necessity, not failure, not defeat, but clarity. The will is yours to witness, not your overlord. So this voice fades, like the dying echo of your own reflection in a deep well. It does not leave you brighter, but it invites you to be still. And in that stillness there is no hiding, no hope, no denial, only the pristine shape of truth, a candle burning in the vast of being, unquenchable, inevitable and somehow magnificent in its simple inevitability. And then, the darkness holds it all, without fear, without grasping. The breath of suffering does not roar its sighs, long and low, through the corridors of the soul. It does not demand, it merely endures, as the sky endures the passing of clouds. Each sorrow that befalls us, each quiet betrayal, each fracture in the illusion of permanence, these are not anomalies, but confirmations. The world is not broken. It is functioning exactly as it must, grinding each hope against the millstone of reality until it is fine enough to be forgotten. We imagine that pain is a signal of error, a deviation from the supposed order of joy. But what if it is the order itself? What if sorrow is not the shadow cast by life, but its very light filtered through the veil of desire? The more one seeks to love the world, the more one must carry its unbearable weight. To be conscious is to be wounded, to sense with each breath the gnawing of time upon the flesh of experience. The illusion persists, because it must. If the world were to unveil its essence too suddenly, too starkly, we would crumble beneath its silence. And so we build dreams, careers, romances, futures that shimmer with promise-like stained glass over a gaping chasm. But light does not enter from the dream, it leaks in from the void beyond. And when the glass shatters, we are not destroyed, we are revealed. In the aftermath of disillusionment, there is a peculiar calm. Not joy, never joy, but a stillness that no longer trembles with expectation. This is the beginning of detachment. Not the cold retreat of the wounded, but the lucid retreat of one who has seen through the mask of becoming. You no longer chase pleasure as if it were substance. You no longer flee pain as if it were evil. You simply remain, present to the shifting textures of existence, like a shoreline, no longer surprised by the tide. Suffering, once stripped of resistance, becomes something quieter. It no longer screams for resolution. It becomes a companion somber, yes, but honest. In its presence, pretense dissolves. You do not have to pretend to be well. You do not have to perform meaning. You are allowed to be weary. You are allowed to sit with the weight of being without decorating it with justification. This is the soul's unchosen awakening, the moment when striving no longer seduces and resignation loses its shame. You do not collapse, you unfold. Like a dying flower that releases its fragrance only in decay, your spirit begins to emit a strange wisdom. You begin to see others not as rivals or saviors, but as fellow captives of the same blind will. Their cruelty ceases to surprise you. Their kindness ceases to redeem you. Everything simply is, and that is enough to hold in the hollow of your understanding. No doctrine saves you. No philosophy grants immunity. Even the truth is not a shield, it is a mirror. And in that mirror, you see the fragility of all things, including your own grasp on what is bearable. But you do not look away. You gaze, and in that act alone you reclaim a sliver of dignity from the jaws of despair. To detach is not to renounce feeling, but to see it as passing. Even the deepest wound does not remain open. It scars, and though the scar remembers, it no longer bleeds. Detachment is the scar of the soul. It speaks of injury endured, of agony survived, of a tenderness that has stopped expecting to be met. Every illusion peeled back leaves the skin raw, but rawness too becomes a kind of perception. You feel the world more clearly, though less romantically. Trees no longer speak of promise, only of time. The sky no longer sings of freedom, only of vast indifference. And yet strangely you feel more at home in this indifferent world than you ever did in your hopeful projections. There is no ascent, no higher realm awaiting your enlightenment. The same earth cradles you now as it always did, its silence unchanged by your inner monologue. But in accepting this, in bowing without plea, you draw nearer to the pulse of what is unnameable. Not divine, not sacred, just present, just inevitable. And perhaps this is the deepest form of love note. The love that clings, not the love that burns, but the love that watches without demanding. The love that stays even when there is nothing to gain. The love that does not seek to change the beloved, nor to rescue them from their fate. The love that sees suffering and does not turn away. You sit within the cage, and for the first time, you stop rattling the bars. Not out of despair, but because you understand they were always part of the structure of the self. The bars are not in the world. They are the world, as known through the will. And in that final recognition, the frantic need to escape begins to dissolve. There is only this breath, this moment, this flicker of awareness between two voids. Let it come, let it pass, let it be nothing more than it is. The will stirs, but you are not bound to follow. You watch, you endure, and in that endurance, you find the ghost of peace. Not its radiant cousin, just the ghost. But it is enough. And even ghosts have their truth. Pain does not call for attention, it simply waits. Like a stone at the bottom of a river, it is not removed by the current, but shaped by it. The soul, too, is shaped by the waters of grief and time, not through resolution, but through erosion. The contours of identity are not built by triumphs, but carved by the relentless smoothing of loss. What remains is not what we sought to preserve, but what could not be washed away. In this way, the most enduring parts of us are forged not in light, but in shadow. We carry dreams like relics, relics of an innocence we mistake for wisdom. We say we desire happiness, but we desire only the brief illusion that something, anything, will finally still the turbulence of the heart. We long for a moment that lasts, a moment untouched by decay. But even in the moment we taste joy, it begins to fade, and the awareness of its passing poisons the sweetness. Time seeps into every pleasure like water into paper, softening it, tearing it gently from the inside. The modern world, in its feverish intoxication with movement, speed, novelty, believes it can outrun this dissolution. It stacks experience upon experience, hoping to build a tower tall enough to touch permanence. But permanence does not reside in accumulation. It resides, if at all, in the recognition that nothing accumulates, that all is slipping through the fingers, even as we clutch harder. Every possession, every title, every memory, even the body, our most intimate illusion of stability is already turning to dust beneath the surface. And yet, it is not despair to see this. Despair is the scream against the inevitable. What comes after the scream is not despair, it is awareness, a quietness, a resting of the hands that once reached for meaning in the shifting sands of becoming. You begin to speak less, for there is less need to convince, to defend, to explain. You watch, and in that watching, something deeper than understanding arises, a kind of knowing without object, a knowledge that nothing can be held, and therefore nothing need be clung to. This is not apathy, it is clarity, the absence of delusion masquerading as purpose. The heart still feels, the mind still moves, but they no longer carry the burden of justification. You do not have to prove your existence through achievement. You do not have to redeem your suffering through narrative. You simply are. And in being, in that bare, exposed being, there is a strange grace. Not the grace of reward, but the grace of relinquishment. The will, when unexamined, leads to madness. When resisted, to agony. But when seen for what it is, a blind, directionless hunger, it becomes almost childlike in its persistence. You do not hate it. You do not fight it. You let it pass through you like wind through the branches of an old tree. You bend, you rustle, but you do not break. And even if you break, the world continues, without judgment. This too is a relief, that the universe is indifferent, that the stars do not concern themselves with your joy or your grief, that no celestial ledger records your moments of despair or triumph. In this indifference, there is freedom. Not the freedom of power, but the freedom of insignificance. To know that your suffering is not special, that your longing is not unique, that you are not a story waiting for its ending, but a fragment of something endlessly unfolding. And when you see this, you begin to weep not in sorrow, but in awe, the way a body weeps when it finally rests, the way a heart weeps when it no longer needs to be understood. You cry for the years spent grasping, for the hours lost in becoming, for the silence ignored in the pursuit of noise. And then you stop crying, and you sit. And for the first time, perhaps, you are truly alone. Not lonely, alone. Aloneness is not a defect of the soul, it is its default state. Others enter and exit, but the core remains untouched. And in that untouched core, there is a serenity that does not require love, nor understanding, nor recognition. A serenity born not of having, but of letting go. The serenity of one who no longer seeks to win, because they have understood that there is nothing to be won. The race was always a circle, the prize was always vanishing, and the runner was always running from themselves. When you stop, the dust settles. And in the settling, you see, the path was never external. The destination was never elsewhere. The entire journey was a movement within through layers of illusion, through the scaffolding of identity, down to the bare floor of being. And that floor is cold, but honest. It offers no comfort, only truth. It does not warm the feet, but it steadies them. And standing upon it, you feel the weight of your life not as a burden, but as a reality that does not need redemption, because it was never wrong. This is the death of hope as the world understands it, and the birth of something quieter, a hope that no longer reaches forward, but rests within. Not a hope for change, but a hope that accepts changelessness. Not a hope for more, but a hope that dissolves the need for more. And in that dissolution, the will sighs, not defeated, not victorious, just silent, for a moment, for a breath, for an eternity perhaps, if you dare not to speak it. There is a tenderness that grows in the soil of resignationa, tenderness without object, without direction. It does not seek to heal nor to improve. It simply flows outward from the quiet wound of awareness. You see the futility, and instead of bitterness, you feel a soft ache, like the echo of a distant lullaby heard through the cracks of memory. Not comforting, but familiar. It reminds you that you are always this fragile, that every smile you ever wore was woven with trembling threads. The will, though blind, is tireless. It whispers still, even in sleep, in the pause between thoughts, in the hushed litany of the body's decay. It hungers not for anything in particular, but simply for the motion of hunger, and so we dress it in names: ambition, desire, purpose, love, so it may feel less monstrous. But beneath all these masks lies the same emptiness, the same inexorable push forward, even as we wish to be still. You watch the world play its theater of noise people bargaining for significance, for affirmation, for the illusion that they are more than passing shadows. Yet none escape the quiet at the end of the stage. Not the exalted, not the broken. All collapse into the same stillness, as if the performance had never happened. The applause dies, the lights dim, and only the dust remembers what was once movement. It is not tragic. It is simply the shape of existence. A dance not meant to be seen, only felt, and once felt, to be forgotten. For memory itself is yet another trick of the will, another, reaching toward permanence, in a world that has never offered it. The past is a phantom that gives the present its color, but steals from it its reality. Every moment lived in memory is a moment uninhabited. And so the wise grow silent not because they know more, but because they know less than they once thought. Their words are few, not because they lack insight, but because they no longer trust language to touch the marrow of truth. For every utterance divides, defines, separates. And the soul that sees through illusion longs no longer to define, but to dissolve. This is not enlightenment. Enlightenment is another myth, another golden fruit hanging just out of reach. It promises a clean escape from suffering, a stairway to serenity. But every stair climbs into a sky that does not exist. There is no arrival, only recognition. The recognition that the escape itself is the illusion. That to be is to ache, To know is to grieve. And to see clearly is to accept the ache without flinching. Detachment, then, is not the cold armor of the Stoic. It is the soft skin left after the armor has been stripped away. It is the willingness to feel without becoming. To let sorrow pass through you without claiming it. To let joy arise and fade without grasping. You become porous. The world enters and exits. You remain, bare, watching. And in this bareness, something wordless flowers. It is not peace, for peace implies contrast. It is not happiness, for happiness implies a cause. It is simply this: being without resistance. Existence without decoration. A soul no longer at war with time or decay or silence. A soul that no longer yearns to be remembered. You walk slower, you speak softer, not out of reverence, but because nothing presses. The urgency that once throbbed in your chest has quieted, like a storm passing over open fields. You have known the weight of longing, and you have seen it for what it is: not a flaw, but a fact. Not a weakness, but a law. And what is understood no longer needs to be resisted. Others will not see this. They will call it detachment, or sadness, or death. They will urge you to return to the world of striving, of hoping, of becoming. They will hand you their maps of meaning, drawn in ink that fades the moment you look too closely. But you will not return. Not because you are beyond them, but because you finally see that there is nowhere to return to. The world is not broken. The world is not whole. The world simply is. And you too are not a project, not a story, not a spirit ascending. You are a flicker of awareness in a sea of blind movement. A brief light, neither cursed nor blessed. You do not need to shine. You only need to flicker until you are gone. And when you go, the world will go on. Not emptier, not altered, just as it always was, just as it always will be. The flame of will remains unquenched. But you, at last, no longer feed it. You no longer believe it must be fed. And that is enough. That is release. The hours slip through the fingers like ash warm at first, then grey, then gone. There is no moment we truly hold. Even memory, so often praised as the curator of self, reveals itself to be a trembling illusion, a museum of shadows. We remember not what was, but what we needed it to be. And in that need, we distort, we embellish, we forget. The past becomes another fiction we tell ourselves to endure the weight of the present. Each face you have loved is now a mask, blurred at the edges, speaking in tones altered by your loneliness. No one remains as they were, and neither do you. The self, this sacred idol of modern existence, dissolves like smoke at the slightest touch of time. What you call I is not fixed but stitched together by habit, by memory, by the trembling hope that someone is watching and will remember. But no one watches. Not the stars, not the sky, not the divine. We exist without witness, and perhaps this is the final mercy. To be seen in our entirety would be unbearable. The will hides itself not only from others but from the self. We do not know the depth of our own hunger. We chase, we build, we suffer, and all along, we imagine we are choosing. But choice is a mask the will wears to keep us moving. Every joy you have known carries within it the seed of loss. That which lifts you must one day let you fall. It is not cruelty, it is the shape of reality. To love is to wound the heart with future absence. To desire is to carve space within the self for inevitable emptiness. And so we orbit, always close to fulfillment, but never touching, never arriving. The will ensures this, it must. For its power lies not in what it grants, but in what it withholds. And even those who claim peace have merely shifted their desires to subtler forms. The seeker of inner truth hungers no less than the seeker of wealth, only differently. Even detachment can become a craving, a crown worn in secret, a new identity to polish in the mirror. But true detachment is not worn, it is not declared. It is the state that arises when all other states have failed to quiet the unrest. You do not choose it. It grows in you like a stillness after long weeping. It grows when you are too tired to lie, too tired to pretend, too tired to dream of salvation. And in this exhaustion, you begin to see with different eyes. The world softens, not because it has changed, but because your demand has died. You no longer ask for it to please you. You no longer demand that it makes sense. And the moment you stop demanding, the world becomes bearable. Not because it is kind, but because you have ceased measuring it by your hunger. The trees, the sky, the cracked pavement beneath your feet, they exist without need of your interpretation. They do not ask you to heal, they do not ask you to smile. They only ask that you be still enough to notice. The will, sensing your stillness, becomes uneasy. It sends tremors, longings, regrets, dreams dressed as warnings. But you do not move, you watch. You feel the stirring, the ache, the temptation. And still, you do not move. This is not victory, it is not strength. It is simply what remains when movement no longer offers escape. In this stillness, others may call you cold. They will not understand. They will see your silence and mistake it for despair. But it is not despair. Despair screams. Despair thrashes. This is different. This is the quiet after the drowning, when the body floats without resistance, when the lungs no longer seek air. To live without illusion is not to live without sorrow. It is to see sorrow not as failure, but as a constant companion, silent, patient, without judgment. And in its company, the soul learns humility. Not the false humility of piety, but the true humility of knowing that you are not owed peace, not owed meaning, not owed anything at all. And from this humility, a strange dignity arises. The dignity of one who suffers without complaint. The dignity of one who does not reach for rescue. The dignity of one who accepts their finitude without bitterness. You become a shadow moving through other shadows. And in your shadow, others may briefly find rest not from you, but from the ceaseless brightness of their own performance. There is no map to this stillness, no method, no teacher. It comes when all other paths have collapsed. It finds you when your questions have died, when your answers have grown silent. It does not elevate. It does not transform. It simply reveals what has always been beneath the soft pulse of being, the ache without name, the flame without shape. And that flame is yours, not to control, not to extinguish, only to witness until it flickers and disappears. What remains after the fire has passed? Not silence, but the memory of heat. Not darkness, but the faint glow left behind on the walls of consciousness. You do not walk away from the will, you drift from it, like smoke from a smoldering wick, trailing the shape of your former hunger without clinging to it. The self becomes a ghost of tension released, a silhouette resting on the edge of vanishing. The world does not greet you with applause. There is no chorus, no final message waiting behind the veil. Only the steady return of ordinary things, the creak of floorboards, the hum of wind, the unnoticed passing of an insect across the table. In these small, unstoried moments, something stirs, not excitement, not revelation, but the texture of existence without longing. You realize now there was never anything to become. All striving was a loop feeding itself. The will promised arrival but delivered only repetition, suffering seasoned with the illusion of progress. You wore masks, and beneath each, only another layer of ache. And now, with the masks fallen, there is no final face, just openness, undefined and free from performance. To remain without pursuit is not to die, but to live outside the fever. You are not numb, you are awake in a quieter register. Even grief becomes softer when it is not pushed away. Even pain loses its edge when it is not named. You let the ache pass through you like wind through reeds. It bends you, yes, but it does not break you. It has no need to. You are no longer fighting the shape of your own suffering. The eyes, once filled with seeking, now learn to rest. They trace the lines of a face not for answers, but simply because it is there. You do not need to fix or fuse. You no longer devour experience, you taste it, lightly, and let it go. You do not cling to love, but you do not deny it either. It moves through you like light through stained glass, and then it is gone. You do not chase its shadow. And so the days begin to change, though not in the ways they used to. You do not wake with urgency. You do not dream with desperation. You carry your presence like a fragile glass bowl, careful not to spill, but unafraid if it cracks. Even broken things have their beauty when seen without judgment. Especially then. There are fewer words now, fewer answers, more space between thoughts, more time to notice the subtle pulse of time moving through you, more room to breathe, to sit with a cup of tea, growing cold, and feel not the loss of warmth but the quiet of its fading. There is peace, not because the will has died, but because you no longer confuse its voice with your own. This is not transcendence, this is not wisdom. This is what remains when the theater empties and the actors go home, the stage bare, the lights dim, the silence return to itself. You sit in that silence. You do not demand that it speak, and still it speaks, not in words, not in signs, just in its being. In this being, you remember that everything must pass, and that this truth so often resisted is the only mercy that endures. Even the will, so unquenchable, softens in the cool stillness of awareness. It whispers still, but you do not answer. You let it echo and dissolve. Not with anger, not with indifference, but with understanding. You see it for what it is, a dream the soul once needed to survive. Now, the dream ends. Not with a crash, not with despair, but with the gentle closing of a book whose final page was always empty. A page that says nothing, yet contains everything. You close the book, you place it down, you rise. No triumph, no defeat, only the stillness of one who no longer asks why. And in that stillness, you disappear. Not into death, not into light, but into the moment. Unbound, unnamed, unharmed,